You are listening to Reinvented. I'm your host, Jen Eckhart. You know, guys, Reinvented is proud to shine a light on important heavy topics such as trauma, abuse, addiction, recovery. You know, it's been the journey of a lifetime since parting ways from corporate media to have a platform that's focused on sharing jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring stories and tales of reinvention from some of the world's brightest and most thought-provoking public figures. We have featured music moguls, models, business tycoons, all diverse background, but one common denominator, and that is resilience. Our next guest is second to none in this category. From overcoming being a gang member, to drug dealing, to surviving years in the most notorious maximum security prisons, to conquering addiction and becoming one of the most renowned chefs in the world. This James Beard Award finalist chef Keith Corbin joins us now to share his incredible story. Keith, welcome to Reinvented, my friend.
Thank you. Before we get started, I was waiting on you to start recording because I want to know, how do I get one of those blow up dolls named after me? That's all I want to know.
Blow up dolls. How do we have do we have a blow up doll? Oh, I get what you're saying.
Yes, your pool.
Right.
Oh,
I see.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. The swans.
Yes.
Blow
the
up.
The swan is Kwame.
Blow up swans. Listen, now that I moved from Manhattan, New York City to Florida, listen, I take my pool floats and my pool maintenance very seriously, Keith Corbin, okay? As should you. I don't know where you're out in LA. Don't you have a pool? Don't you have a blow up swan?
Well, they're digging the pool in the back now, but I don't have this one. I don't have the blow up yet.
Okay, call me when you get your swan, and we'll talk.
All right.
I'll put my people in touch with your people. But you know, Keith, just to get pool floats aside, just to get into this, you know, Keith, when people think of the American dream, right? They think maybe inflatable swans. They think white picket fence, golden retriever, steady job, perhaps owning property, you know, and I don't mean to sound offensive, but they don't exactly equate, you know, former gang member, crack cocaine dealer from the Jordan Downs projects in Watts, Los Angeles, spent time in maximum security prison turned renowned restaurant chef. You know what I mean? But that's why I was like, I got to get this guy on my show because you, my friend, challenge that stigma and prove that the American dream and upward mobility is possible for everyone. Your story isn't a predictable, Prisoner Makes Good drama or some cheesy chef memoir. Your story, Keith, is about what it's like to grow up Black in America under some of the worst circumstances. I mean, to committing acts of violence and crime, to getting locked up, to finding a passion, to then failing again, to then succeeding and fighting for a place at the table. I have to know, do you see yourself as sort of the reinvented modern day version of the American dream?
Absolutely. But the American dream, in my opinion, is what you make it. I tend to take a lot of these ideas or these philosophies that they've been shoving down our throat and deframing them and reframing them, right? The American dream is what you make it. It doesn't have to be a stockbroker or a lawyer or whatever. You know what I mean? It's within you. It's what you want to be and what you want to be known for. The American dream for me is not about riches and finances neither. It's about legacy. When you think about, when they talk about all these pioneers or these big people, the Rockefellers and all these, they always talk about their legacy, right? And what they left behind. And so for me, that's what I look at, what my legacy will be and what I'm leaving behind.
Speaking of legacies, I have a copy of your incredible book here that I have read page to page, California Soul. It is an American epic of cooking and survival. By the way, I love the Breaking Bad theme you got going on here, like the yellow with the smoke. I'm picking up what you're putting down, but I said this to you at the start of the interview, but your book was sent to me personally from a federal prison inmate. Now, I'm not going to reveal who that person was, but it's obvious that your book, Keith, landed on my lap for a reason. I do believe that everything in life happens for a reason and that we are all interconnected. But what I love about your story is that you refuse to impose a clean redemption narrative onto your readers. I mean, you get into all the nitty gritty, all the blood, guts, gory details of your life. I mean, the drug dealing, the cooking crack cocaine, the gang hierarchy, prison politics, gentrification. I mean, you name it, it's in this book. What I have to know, what was the most difficult part for you in reliving these experiences that contributed to such an amazing memoir?
For me, the most difficult part, and it's good to hear that someone from the federal prison sent that to you. That means they read it and they approve of it, right? Because one of the hardest things is navigating, telling your story without telling, in a sense, right? You want to tell your story, but it's kind of hard at times to navigate that line without impacting someone else's lifestyle or livelihood, if you get what I'm saying. And so trying to navigate telling my story without putting other people's program or hustle in jeopardy. You know, so that was a hard part for me, for the book to be accepted among my peers or among the people that I'm speaking to, like in the streets, that's going through the struggle, that's still in the hustle, that's in the prison. I think that was the hardest part for me, just navigating that line where I could tell my story without telling on people.
But speaking of legacies, I mean, just the fact that this book has made it around a federal penitentiary, and this person contacted me and said, yo, you need to have this guy on your show. He's incredible. You are a beacon of hope for a lot of federal prison inmates. You know, you write in your book, Keith, and this is a direct quote, I've been one of the demonized teenage drug dealing gangbangers America was so scared of, who grew up in the 90s in the worst projects in Watts, California. I've been a prisoner in some of the most dangerous maximum security prisons in America, surrounded by inmates, serving life sentences for murder, making moonshine in my cell, and stabbing people in the yard for survival. Like, whew, I had to transcribe that quote from your book. It gave me chills even just reading it just now. You know, I had a chance. This is where I get a little bit of street cred, not as much as you, but maybe a little bit. But I have had a chance to not only meet with people who have been in prison, but actually have gone to visit inmates myself. And what I have been told from inmates is that the biggest challenge of mental warfare is sort of finding hope for a better life when you get out. And, you know, I've heard that the silver lining when you're under those circumstances, the silver lining it's hard to find during your sentence. What would you say to people in prison right now who are fighting to find hope for the life that they have always dreamed of, Keith?
Just start moving towards it, right? Just start moving towards it. When I decided to change my legacy and change my life around, like, it was just an idea. I had no idea how to even where to begin. And so I just took the first step of getting a job, which took me out of the streets from hustling. And from that job, you know, I began to meet people and opportunities began to open up. I think the important part for me was getting outside of my community and my environment and kind of seeing what the world had to offer. You know, I was brainwashed in a sense in my community. I was taught and raised a certain way, and that became my reality. And those became my beliefs, and my beliefs became my reality. Right. And so it's hard to change a person's perspective without showing them something different. And right. So I would say just take the first step towards it. And if you're sitting in there, begin to read and research. You can't visit other places physically, but you can visit them mentally. You can read.
Now that I finished your book, I think I'm going to ship it back to the penitentiary where I received it from, just because I want this to circulate. I want it to be there to inspire other inmates. I think you're right. I think taking that first step and knowing that there is hope, there is life on the other side of this, and you're living proof of that.
And the first step may not be the right step, but it leads to another step, right?
Right.
and it leads to a direction where you're putting the past behind you.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's not going to be a straight path to whatever you're trying to accomplish, but it's putting distance between you and your former life. So taking a step in the opposite direction. That's all I'm saying.
I love it. I hate where we're at in a society as it relates to inmates and our treatment of them, particularly those serving time for like non-violent crimes. Keith, I have been a longtime advocate for prison reform. And what I admire about you and your story is that, as I've said before, you challenge the stigma of what it means to be a convicted felon to being the success story you are today. I mean, you write in your book, I've been an ex-felon who tried to go straight and worked his ass off to get promoted in a civilian job, only to be fired because of your past and left wondering, hey, is gangs and crime really the only paths available? And, and I'm sure you feel the same, but like, I want to see former inmates become productive, tax-paying members of society. I want them to be like responsible members of society. I read an interesting, and it was actually not interesting, it was kind of depressing, but the United States has a current recidivism rate of 70%. Within
72%.
72% within 5 years, I was reading. That means that, for my viewers and listeners, that within 5 years of a prisoner's release, 72% of prisoners will reoffend. Now,
watch this. It's designed for that, right? Prison is big business, right? It's people actually have stake in prisons. Like, it's designed to make people money.
Right.
If I parole from prison, and one of the requirements for me to get off of probation or parole is to find employment. That's a requirement.
Right.
But then the job or the employment industry are not hiring you with a criminal background. Exactly. So then I can't get the job that I'm required to have in order to get off probation or parole. So now I'm stuck in this situation where eventually they're going to trip me up on something. Yeah. Right. The prison system, the judicial system as it stands right now is so unforgiving. If we're talking about young men and women who grew up in these inner cities who hasn't had a network. See, the difference is when I come home from prison or while I'm in prison, while I'm trying to figure out what it is I'm trying to do, I'm going to have failures. Right. I'm going to stumble, because I don't know what I'm passionate about. I didn't grow up in a situation where, I was doing gymnastics, I was doing swimming, I played sports, and I'm finding what I enjoy early on because of the exposure that I was able to have in my community. The only thing I was exposed to was drugs and gangs and hustle and robbery. That's all I know. And so now at a 30, 40-year-old man, to try to find what I'm passionate about in order to go for it, I'm going to make mistakes along the way. Right. And they lock you up trying to figure it out. Right. It's just so unbalanced. It's so unfair.
Right. What is the number one thing that you think needs to be fixed as far as like rehabilitating inmates to reassimilate themselves back into regular society?
First, let's set the record straight. When it comes to incarceration and CDC and federal prison, there's no programs for rehabilitation. Yeah. They're really not. The rehabilitation starts with yourself. You have to start to rehabilitate yourself. Amen. And that takes a person to have a life experience where he changes like the way he thinks. He go through something that just literally shakes his core. Right. And that situation is different for everybody. And so it may take a person to go to prison the first time and experience something. You're like, man, I'm done with this shit. It may take a person to go 5, 6 times, right? Because the programs in there, the way the prison is set up, it's not. For me, my experience, the prison system was just an extension of my community. Right. The same things apply. Inadequate medical care, no jobs available, police brutality, racism, discrimination. Right. All that is, I dealt with that on the streets, and I dealt with it in prison. Yeah. Right. They're not vested and rehabilitating you. Because if they rehabilitate you while you're there, then they have no recidivism.
Right.
And then the prisons doesn't make money, or the investors in the prison doesn't make money. It's not their job or goal to rehabilitate you.
Right.
They babysit you.
Yeah. Makes
That's
sense. Makes sense.
You have to do the work yourself. Like, you have to begin to rehabilitate yourself. You can't put it on no one else. Like, if you want to make a change, you have to start with you.
And it's the same with addiction, right? It starts with yourself. You can't get sober just because someone tells you to. You got to want it for yourself. But, you know, it seems our politicians turned a blind eye to what's happening in our prison system. I've seen it firsthand. I hear it from people. You know, you read about it on the news. I mean, do you think that prison reform is a real necessity that's lacking in this country?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But before we even get to the prison reform, like, the way they're sending people to prison, that needs to be solved first.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
The way they're it's a predatory situation in certain communities.
Yeah.
And the way they're filling the prisons, the way they're convicting people, the sentencing laws, and even the police that's patrolling. Like, I lived in Watts my whole life.
Right.
I didn't go an hour without seeing the police sharking around.
Right. You just feel like
Me and my wife now, we live in Westwood, and her complaint is she never sees the police over there. And like, It's like, so how does she feel protected?
Right.
And I have to remind her, that's because they all down in the underserved community,
right.
so they can fill the prisons. Literally,
Watts.
I've been in Westwood for 2 years now, and I've never seen the police in my community. I've seen them on the main street on my way to the freeway, but I've never seen them come up my street.
Wow.
I've never seen them over there whatsoever in 2 years.
Isn't that incredible?
And in Watts, I can't go 1 hour without seeing them sharking around the street.
But it's so true. And it's so interesting how the dynamic has now totally shifted, right? Like, you've went from one side of the spectrum to the other. You know, you are a renowned chef by trade. But while in prison, you made kimchi out of leftover vegetables and tamales from ground up Fritos. I mean, you developed your culinary palate, Keith, and ingenuity by creating these prison spreads out of like the unbearable commissary ingredients. And while experimenting during your prison shifts in the kitchen, what was your like aha moment where you were like, you know what? I might actually have a future at being a chef and doing this professionally.
Well, it wasn't, I didn't have no aha moment. And making the kimchi and the tamales, like, and that's why this book is so important. Like, because I'm not telling my story, I'm telling our story.
Right.
Right. What I've went through and the things I've created, people have went through and been creating these things before I was even there. Kimchi is something I was showed in the county jail by an Asian bunkie of mine. The tamale is something that the Latinos make, right? And so we share this information with each other. Like, these things, this is our story. I had an opportunity to tell our story. And I think that's why I resonated with the young man in the federal prison, because he's making the same thing. He's dealing with the same thing. And I'm glad I appreciate him relating to that story and wanting to get out there. Him giving you that book is him in a way saying, hey, tell my story, because it's his story too.
Yes, absolutely.
It's totally his story. And so I don't want to take credit for inventing anything, right? I'm just in a position to tell the stories of the inmates in federal and state prison and what we're making in there. I've just been the one fortunate to tell the story, but I'm not a creator of any of those dishes.
Well, I think if anything, though, it does display the ingenuity, right? And the fact how resourceful humans can be, right? When living under such like inhumane circumstances. You know, prison cooking is infamously known for being relatively simple, but apparently really good if made correctly with the right ingredients. Like, I've heard stories, Keith, as I'm sure you have and have lived, but like, I mean, people using V8 juice to create like tomato pasta sauce, you know, like using irons that would normally be used for ironing clothes, but for like
cheese toast.
Yeah, cheese toast or burritos or quesadillas, you know, Comet bottle caps to use as cheese graters. You know, even I've heard that tuna fish, cans of tuna fish is often used as is considered currency in prison.
Tuna, mackerel, even noodles are currency. Those are the base of your dishes. Like that's your onion, garlic, and tomato right there. Like that's what dishes are built on. Noodles is our pasta. Tuna and mackerel and maybe even a roast beef is our protein. Dried beans, and then you just build on top from there. You add your squeezed cheese, your jalapenos, your sausage, and you tailor it to whatever culture or direction you want. But yeah, those typically are the foundation of all dishes: noodles, tuna, and smoked sausage.
And now when he says noodles, y'all, we're talking ramen. We're talking ramen noodles, like microwave noodles.
Ramen noodle on the street is 35 cents. I remember they was 10 cents. In the county jail, they're probably 175. In prison, there are $1.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes.
That's unbelievable. I know this is going to sound like a weird question, but I am curious to know, since you're a renowned chef and you have your own successful restaurant now, what is Chef Keith Corbin's favorite prison meal? Like, what was your go-to? Like, see, I made you laugh. I made you smile. We have to know. The people want to know. What was your favorite prison meal?
So using commissary and not the kitchen.
Correct.
I used to make a dish where I would put the rice in the bowl and then add the layers of flavor, the mackerel, the jalapeno, and then I'll start over. Take the rice, cut up the smoked sausage, toss it in the rice, put that layer down in the bowl, put the mackerel on top, some jalapenos, and then I'll take my boiling water and fill it to the top of the rice and just set it and let it blow up and let all those flavors come together and season the rice.
Wow.
And then I would top it with my squeezed cheese or whatever else I want over the top. And then just eat it like a bowl.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've never heard of mixing mackerel with sausage. That's an interesting combination of flavors. But hey, you got to get your protein somewhere.
But
right?
when you think about it, right? And so that when you think about it, you do mix fish with sausage. Let's think about a gumbo. You have a smoked andouille chicken sausage with shrimp or crab or some type of seafood, right?
Yeah.
Or you use a fish stock in a sense, right? So these flavors go together.
Right.
You're really just bringing in the smoke from the sausage and those spices, to bring another layer of flavor, and then the fish has another layer of flavor. And if you do it right, it can be very delicious.
Well, if anybody can bring those combinations of flavors together, it's you, my friend. So, all right, I haven't been to prison. I haven't gone to prison for anything, but I have my version of a quote unquote commissary meal, of a prison meal. Is that like even a thing? Can I say that? But like
a spread. So let's just call it a spread.
Yeah, spread. Okay, we'll call it a spread. We'll call it a non-fancy spread. So, but what's funny is both dishes require Doritos. All right. I'm going to go through them. All right. So the first is, so I did 2 years at Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama, before I transferred to my alma mater, University of Florida. But there is a thing there called Mama Goldberg's Nachos. All right. It's the orange Dorito nacho cheese chips and only one other ingredient, and that's pepper jack cheese. And but the key is not using the microwave. The key is using an oven and just letting the cheese melt on top of the yep. And now one would never really put those two flavors together, but I'm telling you, it's good. Good shit. Okay.
So in the county jail, a lot of the spreads are made with chips because you're using it as a filler and as a texture, right? In the prison, you very seldom get spreads made with chips.
Right.
You actually use the chip to dip it. So you do use the chip, it's just not crunched up in the spread. But yeah.
All right, and my second one here is a taco salad, but it's kind of like a broke ass taco salad, but I love it. It's like my guilty pleasure. People might think this is gross, but it's actually Cool Ranch Dorito chips,
Okay.
red beans, fried ground beef, or I guess if you're a vegetarian, what's an alternative to ground beef? I guess tofu, fry, or like what's the yeah, or the meat, the Beyond Meat, like the fake meat, cheese, lettuce, and light Caesar vinaigrette dressing, and you mix it all together. I know it sounds gross. It is like chef's kiss. It is so good.
But that one sounds more like a prison's dish than the first one.
Okay, probably. You're probably right. Your culinary talent was almost lost, Keith, to a life of drugs and crime. You know, it's known that you struggled with cocaine addiction, even as you navigated post-prison life and in working with famed chef Daniel Patterson at Local in Los Angeles.
And Roy Choi.
And you even worked for Daniel Patterson at his Michelin star fine dining establishment, Koi, in San Francisco.
I staged, volunteered a lot of hours just to learn, yeah.
Now, it's not lost on fans and readers that Daniel Patterson did not abandon you during the height of your addiction. And in fact, neither did your wife, Renee Corbin. How difficult was your recovery journey? And when did that epiphany that you needed to get sober hit you?
So yeah, that one always takes me back.
It's a heavy question.
That one always takes me back. So since I came home from, I was dealing. So let's just start from the beginning. I sold cocaine. I sold crack. And so cocaine became a habit of mine as early as 14, 15 years old.
Wow.
I first started using it to stay up. Well, I first started using it to test it.
Right.
Before I purchased, then I used it to stay up, to move the product. And then I started using it to party, to club and have sex. And I always found a reason for it. But then when I got out the last time and I began this journey of transformation, I almost lost everything. I almost lost the business. I almost lost Renee. And I almost lost my daughter to child services. But what it was this one particular night, me and Renee was having a dispute about, me getting my act together. And a person that grew up with no responsibilities and didn't know how to set boundaries, didn't know how to communicate. I took what she was saying as an attack. And so I got in my feelings. And so I'm like, I'm leaving. I'm storming out the house. I'm going to go get high. My daughter, for whatever reason, just was like, no, daddy, just lay down. You know what I mean? Just lay down. And I'm like, no, I got to go. And so she's like, well, then I'm going to come with you. I'm like, okay. And so I'm riding around, hopefully to put her to sleep, but she wouldn't go to sleep. And she's like, Daddy, is we just gonna go home before the sun come down, before the sun come up? Like, are we gonna go in the house before the sun come up? And I said, okay. And so I decided, if you don't go to sleep, I'm gonna just stop by my people's, grab what I need, and head home. Now, mind you, my kids have never known anything about my lifestyle outside of the house. And that moment, I broke. That it had got to that point, right? That I had forsaken all the other principles that I had in regards to separating my lifestyle from my household, from my kids particular. Right. And it broke. And when I walked in the house, I just fell down to Renee and said, man, I need help. Like, can you help me figure it out? Yeah. And shit, Renee's like, hell yeah, had me in rehab the next day.
Oh, that's great. No.
Oh man, and so yeah, and fortunately for me, I had no excuses. Pandemic had hit, the businesses were shut down, there was no movement, And so like God says, just sit still, right?
Right.
Just sit
Be
still.
still and
And,
know.
and and so that was my moment to sit still and allow him and myself to work on me.
Wow.
And 45 days later, it was a 90-day program. But 45 days later, um, I was released from the rehab and haven't touched drugs or alcohol since. And it's 4 years now.
4 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like I'm still like, let's be clear, 45 days. And so it's just God. Like,
Yeah.
I've went 30 days on the
Of
streets.
course.
I could never get past 30 days
Right. They always
before I found a reason to
they
relapse.
always say you have to have that rock bottom moment that kind of like sends shockwaves through you. That's like, okay,
Yep.
I got to get off this path. The path
Yeah.
I'm on is leading to nowhere. And
To nowhere. And I have so much. Like, I have a beautiful woman, I have kids, I have the business, I have the blueprint, I have the perfect opportunity to succeed.
right.
And so that's another key point, that for people that's listening, that's coming home from prison, or that's overcoming addiction, or coming out of gang life, or whatever it is, they give us this false idea that once you get a job or get into mainstream society, that you walk through this magic door and everything else goes away.
Right. No, it's
But
not that
no,
simple.
those things follow you through that door.
Yep.
And if you don't turn and face it,
Right.
it will be a gravitational pull
Mm.
backwards, right back through that door into the old life. If you don't turn and deal with your addiction, deal with your the lack of boundaries, if you don't deal with the way you're thinking and solving problems, if you're not dealing with these issues,
Right.
you will find yourself sucked right back in.
Right. No, that's a
And I almost was sucked right back in.
right.
And I turned and faced the addiction. And from the addiction, I'm in a clear mind. I started to see these relationships I was having with people, and I had to start setting boundaries.
Even people who aren't addicts, it's a great thing to set boundaries with people. I mean, that's an important life lesson.
Yeah, and you're gonna hurt some feelings, but if people are offended by you protecting yourself, then they're not for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
I
Like,
love
that's a
that.
way of
Yeah.
intentionally vetting people out of your life.
I recently had, it's funny you say that, Keith. I recently had to part ways with somebody because, professionally speaking, because they don't clap when I win. You know that
Yeah,
saying, always surround yourself with a team of people who clap when you win. And I was like,
yeah,
you're not, you ain't clapping. You're doing the
yeah.
opposite.
You're doing the
Bye.
opposite.
Bye.
And you have and those things are important. They're difficult,
Yeah.
but they're very vital.
Absolutely, and especially in your
Yeah.
recovery journey. Not to backtrack here, but for my viewers and listeners who are tuning in right now who have not read a copy of your book, I'm sure they're dying to know, like, hey Keith, like, tell us about like the craziest encounter from a drug deal that you have experienced. No, I mean, you're so unfiltered in this book, and it's why I admire you so much, because a lot of people play it safe and don't get into the nitty gritty like you do. But like, for some reason, I can't picture you. Like, you have to understand, I'm a huge fan of Breaking Bad. I'm like rewatching the show now for like the 15th time, but I can't picture you, Keith, in like the middle of a desert in a Winnebago with a mask on and your underwear, like cooking meth. I can't picture that. So
Yeah.
tell us, like, what's like the craziest story that you've ever like experienced as far as a drug deal is concerned?
The craziest story. So I had a team. Me and a friend of mine formed our own clique in a way for us to move the drugs. And so I was the chemist and the connect. So I would source
You were the
the
Walter
drug.
White in this
I would
scenario.
I would source the drugs and cook it, and then my partner would set up the distribution and move it. Um, and so through my role, I winded up getting reached out to by another gang, a member from another gang who wanted to source some cocaine.
Okay.
Right? Wanted me to cook it up for them as well. So they wanted it hard. And so I went and collected the money and I brought it back to the spot. And I'm talking to my partner and I'm like, man, look, we're gonna just take their money, put it with ours. And then we're just gonna get 2 kilos. And then I'll take theirs out, hold a portion of it, and then cook it back up to what it's supposed to be. So it's a win. So let's say they wanted 9 ounces and we take 2 ounces out and make it 7 and I cook it back up to 9. We win an extra 2 ounces, just as an example. And his thing was, no, let's just take it. And I'm like, no, we're not going to just take it. You know what I mean?
Idea.
And so we having a disagreement there, but we sent our buddy off to go get the cocaine, the 2 birds, the 2 kilos. And then when he comes back, he usually hands it to me because I'm the one that deal with the raw product.
Right.
And he hands it to my buddy. And right then I sensed that there was a problem. Right.
Yeah.
And so when I told my partner, just give me the shit I paid for the other dude, and I'll come back and deal with our shit later. And he pulled out a gun and said, we're not giving them nothing, we're taking this. And I told him, no, you're taking it. And the only way you're going to take it is if you use that gun. Other than that, you're going to give me that load. And so, long story short, we wind up going to war. And I talk about that in the book too. Right. Shooting the house up and doing the whole dance. Yeah, that was the life. Like you think that the problems come from people that's outside of your house. Mm-hmm. In the dope game, a lot of the problems is the people right next to you.
Wow. The
plotting and conniving and scheming with the people right around you. You can't keep tabs on everybody. Right. And so, the police typically get to you through the person next to you. Yeah. From their mistakes, not from yours.
Yeah.
Or you find yourself in a situation from other people's greed, not yours. Yeah. And so that was one of the, and it wound up being a situation on 2 fronts. One, now I'm shooting up project houses and shooting at people through my projects. And then I also now have to deal with this problem with the other guy not getting his drugs. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so now I'm navigating these 2 situations, and I talk about it in the book. It just drove me to a place where I was coked out and crazy. I went from hustling to just shooting like crazy for a period of time. And what slowed that down was I winded up going to jail for possession of firearm. I got caught with a gun, and that set me down. You know what I mean? Right. And during that time that I was set down, my partner that betrayed me was killed in the streets. Yeah. Shit caught up to him. So,
growing up in Watts, you witnessed the drug game and the dark side of the world very early in life, like too early in life. People who don't come from that world, Keith, have a hard time relating or understanding that oftentimes that's like your only route. It's all you've ever known. Tell us about your influences at a young age and like what drew you to your prior life.
That drew me. I was born in it.
Yeah.
Like, I was born in 1980. By then, cripping was already established and drug hustling was already established.
Yeah.
And my projects and my family was at the forefront of both of them. And so when I got up in age, or during the course of even growing up, that they don't have anything else to teach me, to talk to me about besides the streets.
Right.
No, that's all they know. And so I'm already being groomed and bred. Like, this is all we know.
Right.
And so when it came time to 13 years old, my older brother, always, whenever I needed money, he broke me off. I get 13, he's like, I can't keep like giving you money. like you need to find a hustle.
Right.
And he didn't have the know-how to teach me how to fill out a job application. He didn't like how to go after a job. He called me up and said, "Hey, little bro, check it out. Come by the house." When I went by the house, he had a couple of kilos of coke and was like, "I'm gonna teach you how to cook."
Right.
You know what I mean? And he taught me how to cook.
And how old were you when that happened?
13, 14. Well, my brother Truett had just got killed. So he was killed in 94. So I was approaching 14 years old.
Yeah. You know, in your book, California Soul, you are refreshingly honest with the struggles you faced having lost family members and many friends to murder in Southern California. You know, as you stated, you were even a member of the Grape Street Crips.
Yeah.
You lost your brother, as you said, at 13 years old. And you also just recently lost your father not long ago. You know,
Yeah.
even though you have left the gang life, does it ever still feel like bits of it lingering in the atmosphere around you? Like, do you ever fear for your safety ever?
I mean, it's a vulnerable situation. And when I say I left, I'm not a active participation in the retaliation and, and all these things. But those guys are still my family and my brothers, right? Like I have history with everyone in the Jordan housing projects and throughout the Watts community. These are young men and women that I share Popeyes with. Like these are, or you have shared chips and a soda. You know what I mean? Walk to school with, hid behind cars doing shootings. You have young men that's in prison because we were together and they got the conviction and I was able to come home. You have young men that's in the grave because the bullet hit them and missed me. Mm-hmm. And so like, let's separate, let's separate the activity of the gang activity, but not of the people, because those are my people. Like that's my community. You get what I'm saying? You understand that?
Saying. Yeah. Yeah.
Like the activity, I'm past the activity. But like those are like that's my family. Like those are my people, and those are the people, not just in Watts but throughout.
Right.
That's in that situation. Those are my people. I know they struggle, and those who I wrote the book for, and that's why I remain tangible. And so, yes, vulnerability is always around me because I'm still tangible.
Right.
Right. I can't lead or be that example or that inspiration 100 miles away from the people that I'm trying to inspire.
Yeah.
And so I'm still present in a way. And so I can be that inspiration. So I can bring a different conversation. So I can be a different example. And so through that, I'm always vulnerable, especially when I'm pulling up on a block and I'm not pistol packing or that I haven't been in it in a while, that I'm not as sharp as I was, I don't see certain things approaching anymore. I don't get the hair standing up on my arms.
Right.
But I still go back in the battlefield because those soldiers need someone to lead them out. Right. And so I'm always vulnerable. And so, yes, it is a scary situation. Yeah. But I'm up for that challenge because that's what this is for. What I'm doing to never, in my opinion, make me no multimillionaire or billionaire. Remember, it's about the legacy and what I'm leaving behind. And I have a legacy of turmoil and trauma and destruction, and I want to reverse that, right? And so I have to go back to that very area that view me in that way and change their viewpoint about me and help those, to change the narrative and conversations that they're having about me with other people. Yeah. And the only way to do that is to be there. Yeah. They have to see it. They have to witness it in order to talk about it.
Yeah. You're breaking those generational chains, right? What everything you've always known, what you've grown up in, you are actively out there proving to the world there is another way. There is another way.
While still sharing the same soda and bag of chips, while still asking for fries out the Popeyes bag. Yes. Yes, I'm still the same dude, man. Just I move differently. I think differently. I have different life experiences. Yeah. And the same way, I was able to share those drug deals going bad on the block, the same way I was able to show you how to go put in work and get away, how to bag into the gas station, or how to get up at a certain time of the morning, or how to move to get away. Now I'm over there just trying to talk to you about how to get
Man,
out.
Keith, I wish you were my best friend back when I was using a fake ID. I'm sure you could have taught me a thing or two on the streets, my friend. But look, life is all about choices. And you mentioned in your book that you always carried a gun with you for safety reasons. You have cited times where you thought about getting retribution on those who harmed loved ones of yours and those who are threatening the new life that you've created for yourself. But you chose not to. Why?
And so there was a situation where, I had kind of removed myself from the activities, and I had got the first job, and I moved to the Bay Area for a while, but we had a restaurant down in Watson, my community. So I used to fly down every week to oversee and check on that restaurant. And so while I was down this particular time, before I was leaving that day, I made my rounds through my projects, to say my goodbyes and see y'all next week, or, have a conversation, whatever. And I'm passing by my auntie house to say goodbye to her. And as I'm passing by, I don't see nobody out there. And my little brother's driving. And so as I'm coming up the street and I look over my shoulder in the back, see him. So I'm telling my little brother to bust a U-turn. As we're busting a U-turn, there's a car that I didn't know at the time is parked to the curb. And as we're busting a U-turn, they're getting out of the car. And the only thing I seen was the rifles.
Oh.
And as we're busting a U-turn, they begin to rip the car up as we're turning from the side, the back. So luckily we was at a turn.
The car that you're in is being shot at.
The car that I'm in being shot up, being riddled by AKs and handguns. And so we're flying up the street, we make a right, and I make it back to the restaurant. And when I get there, you have an influx of people just pulling up and coming out of the restaurant to see what's going on. My first instinct was to beat those young men back to where they're going. Just right off the bat, I'm going to beat y'all there, I'm going to meet y'all there. And so I got a few guys, put them in the car, shot by the house, grabbed some guns, and headed over there. And while I'm heading over there with these gentlemen, these are the very gentlemen that I hired at the restaurant where I got my first job. These young men are following my path out. They asked for opportunity, and I'm leading the way for them. And now here I am, due to my pride and my sick way of thinking of retaliation,
right.
I'm taking them right back into the life. And so as I'm contemplating this and we pull up, I spot a young man coming out of the liquor store, be honest, coming out of the liquor store, red hat on. We pull over to the side and I'm opening the door to get out the car. And the rear view mirror on the door catch me, and I look back, and my little brother and my friend, and I see them. And it hit me like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And so I just tapped the driver and say, man, pull off.
Wow.
Just go ahead, pull off. And in that moment, I just decided to love them more than I loved myself, or more than I loved the pride. You know what I mean? I loved them more. And I told him to pull off. But that young man that came out that store with that red hat don't know how close he was to losing his life for an incident that he had no idea took place.
Right, right.
And so I carry that with me.
Yeah.
I never know how close I am.
Right.
And so I'm conscious about how I move.
Yeah.
And the association with certain things. You know what I mean? Because he was only associated because of the area he was in and the color he had on. He had nothing to do with the shots that was just fired.
Right.
And he almost paid the price for it. And so that I move with that in mind. So I'm conscious about what I'm attached to.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
To me, that's a total God thing. Like, I feel
yeah,
like God spoke to you in that moment and was like, no, you're not gonna, you got to think about those two guys and your little brother in the back. You got to put them before yourself, and you got to think
yeah.
about the men that you want them to be. And they want to get off this path. I mean, that is so powerful. Thank you
And
for
that was the
sharing that.
last attempt of any street life ever.
That was the
That was
end.
the last. That was the end.
You know, you talk about your grandmother, Granny Luella Henderson, in your book, her cooking and the influence she had on you. You even have a sweet picture of her at the beginning of your book. You know, she was the mother of the neighborhood, sort of the glue that held the Jordan Downs community in Watts, Los Angeles together. Give us a little taste about what a normal meal in her house would look like.
You know, my grandmother would get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and spend the entire day cooking for dinner.
Wow.
Uh, I'm talking about the
That's love.
largest amount of food, um, cheap cuts of meat, but cooking it nice and slow to tease out all the flavor. And anybody was welcome to eat. You know, her thing was feeding the community. So my friends hung out. They was able to sit down and eat. My grandfather out there listening to the blues or the oldies, and his friends out there having drinks, you know, before they go, they eat.
I
You
love
know,
it.
her friends over there from her poker games and, you know, watching her westerns. And so she just cooked the food, you know,
Yeah.
and so that's what my connection to food is through my granny, not in the way of teaching me how to cook, but
Bringing community together, it sounds
the
like.
community, the gathering, and the
Yeah.
love for feeding people.
Yeah.
You know, you can come over to my granny house for the first time, and I talk about this in the book. And you know, a friend of mine, you know, will come over. I'll just meet him at school or in the streets, and the first question she'll ask you is, "When your birthday?" And you'll tell her your birthday, and guaranteed on that day, if you came over there, she had a cake baked for you.
Oh,
And if you
that's
didn't
so
show up, and if you
sweet.
didn't show up, the rest of us ate it. But you
Right.
know,
So you had to
um,
be there.
yeah. So
Right.
she always had a cake on the table and a cake in her room.
Oh,
Uh, yeah.
that's so sweet. Well, we know how close the two of you were. If your grandmother was alive and with us today, what do you think she'd say about you now?
She wouldn't. She'd still be crying.
Oh.
She would like it's even for my mother. Like I've had men that I was in the streets with come to my restaurant and see how I move and operate today. I'm talking about street dudes.
Mhm.
Literally cried in this restaurant to see where I'm at and see what I'm doing
Ugh,
because it's just unimaginable.
I'm getting
If
emotional.
you and to see me right now having these conversations and what I'm doing in the restaurant, it brings people to tears.
Yeah.
And the number one thing is you're supposed to be dead.
Yeah.
There's no way you can, there's no way. Like I have people come home from prison that did time with me and that was in the streets with me and come up here just to see it with their own eyes.
Because they don't believe it.
They, I don't believe it,
Wow. Wow.
but we're here and we're doing the work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
incredible. Well, she is here with you, and I know that you have quite a guardian angel, and I know that she's so proud of all that you've achieved. You know, your children, Keith, have seen two sides of Keith Corbin. You know, they've seen the drug dealer, prison, absent father, now entrepreneur, success story, father, community leader. You know, we just had Grammy Award winning rock star Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins on this show not long ago, who was very candid in sharing that he does talk to his kids about his abusive childhood. I'm curious, do you and your kids discuss your past?
I have a son who's 26. I have a daughter who's 20. And I have a stepdaughter that's 22 that goes to Howard Medical School. And the three of them have read my book.
Wow. Wow.
I have my 8-year-old who, because they read the book, wants to read the book. I find certain stories in the book to read to her at the end of the night. But I'm not ready to give her that story yet
Maybe
because
save those for a later age.
she didn't witness it.
Right.
You know, I was only absent in her life as I was figuring my life out, living in the Bay Area, working in a different restaurant. So I was absent for a different reason,
Right.
not from prison or the streets. but trying to get my life together.
Yeah.
And I moved to the Bay Area to work and open restaurants and continue to learn the craft. And so there's a different situation that she don't know anything about it. And then I have a son who's 2 right now, who's growing up in goddamn Brentwood, Westwood, who don't know nothing about nothing. So like his conversation and my 8-year-old conversations with my other 3 kids conversation, like it'd be like they're talking about 2 different guys.
There's light years between them. Exactly.
Light years between them.
I understand.
Absolutely.
You are now a success story. You are the creative force behind Alta Adams, your restaurant in Los Angeles. Whoop, whoop. You cook up soul food, staples from your childhood. Keith, I have to ask, you have said you will consider hiring anyone. You run a kitchen in a successful restaurant. Sometimes, like if I get bored enough, especially during the pandemic when COVID was happening, I get fixated on these like damn Gordon Ramsay cooking shows. I can't get enough of them where he like eviscerates these chefs for making like minor errors, like you put salt instead of sugar. Let's say I'm a line chef at one of your restaurants and I accidentally put like chicken on the plate instead of lamb. Like, would you put my face between 2 pieces of bread and call me an idiot sandwich? Or do you have like a slightly different approach?
Oh, I have to have a different approach.
Okay.
And I'll tell you many reasons. One, I'm not going to talk to nobody in any way that I wouldn't want to be talked to.
Love
right.
That.
You got to understand, like I'm committed to hiring people that was me. Right.
Yeah.
And so the last thing I need is a rumble in here. I'm getting older. You feel me? I don't need one of these young men hit me in the mouth.
Right.
Because I'm trying to be Gordon Ramsay in the kitchen. Nah.
Yeah.
Nah. Like I'm going to give them the same respect that I would want if I was in their position. Because I'm hiring me and I know how I will respond with a person embarrassing me, disrespecting me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so for me, and also my goal is teaching you how to cook. You're going to learn that in the kitchen. You're going to burn some toast. We're going to tell you, cook it again.
Right.
You're going to cut the vegetables wrong. And I'm going to tell you, let me show you, cut it again. Right. My job is to help you change the way you think.
I love that.
I just want you in here with me.
Right.
So I can have different conversations with you.
Right.
So I can expand your mind. Right. And like I want to take my team on places, take them places where they can see things different and begin to question what they've been taught or the way they've been practicing life all this time. Right. That's my goal as a chef. I'm here to change lives. The food, you're going to learn that. You're going to learn in the kitchen.
It'll come
like many of us have learned how to cook because our mama was on drugs and our daddy was on drugs. No one taught us how to get in there and feed ourselves and feed our brothers and sisters, right? We've learned that. We learned how to make the eggs. We learned how to make the pigs in a blanket. We learned how to put the biscuits in the oven. We just naturally learned that because we had to get in the kitchen because we was hungry.
Right.
So these young men and women, they gonna learn how to cook.
Right.
I'm here to help them change the way they think.
I love that. If you got pitched to do a reality cooking show, would you consider it?
If my team was on board, because it's a team effort, it's not just about me. I wouldn't, you know what I mean? So if people were around me on board and wanted to give it a shot, absolutely.
Oh man, I would love, and I know a lot of people out there would love to see a Chef Keith Corbin cooking reality show, and just that you have such a different approach to cooking. You don't do the yelling and the screaming, but you just being a mentor to these young men and women who just want to learn the craft.
Oh no, I meet you where you at. Like if it's more so about not frying the chicken right, it's like you not showing up without letting me know. Let me holler at you. And it's straight like that.
Yeah.
Meet me in the back. Let me holler at you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because that's the count. Like that's what they know.
Right.
Let me holler at you. Not let me talk to you. Right. Let me holler at you. And I teach them about being responsible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I have that straight up conversation, and I always try to tie the conversation back to what they know so they can understand it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's beyond cooking almost. Like it's more than food.
It's just like this. It's just like this. We're at school. I done got into it with somebody at lunch, and you my road dog. I done got into it with somebody at lunch. And they're saying, meet them at the school. I'm telling you that I need you with me
Right.
to go to battle.
Right. Right.
And I show up and you not there
Yeah.
to go to battle with me.
Yeah.
They understand that.
Right.
So when we have a shift, we going to war.
I love that.
I need you to show up for this war.
Right.
Let's go to war together.
Right.
If you can't go to war with me, then what are we doing? If you told me, you know what, my dude, man, I can't even be there this time. Cool, let me call somebody else.
Right.
Or let me figure out another strategy where I can go into this battle successful.
Right.
But when you're telling me you're going to be there, you're going to war with me, and you don't show up, we got an issue.
Yeah.
And typically in prison, that deals with discipline. It's just like having these real conversations about showing up, like,
right.
you know what I mean?
And
being accountable and being reliable, especially because your word is everything.
If you do get pitched a show, like, what would we call it? Like California Soul? Or, that's too predictable. Soul Kitchen? Soul
California
Man?
Soul.
Soul Man. I'm a soul
California
man.
Soul.
California
Everything
Soul.
California Soul. Because that's the work we're doing.
Yeah.
We're touching it. We're getting into the souls. Like that's.
I love that.
Because that's where I'm at. I'm in California. I'm dealing with California issues.
It's
I'm dealing with people
food.
right here.
It's beyond food. You're doing actual. You're cooking soul food, but you're doing soul work, and I think that's really admirable.
That's it.
Where do you see your creativity taking you next? Like another restaurant, prison reform, legislative advocacy, perhaps? What's next for Keith Corbin?
You know what? I enjoy cooking. I love feeding people. We do have a deal for another restaurant in the South Bay area. I just went and looked at a location for a restaurant in Crenshaw. Wow. I have a potential deal for a restaurant in Atlanta. All those opportunities for me. Yeah. It's just to get into another community and do the work.
I love that.
It's just an entry point for me. Yeah. My focus is the work. My focus is my people. My people is like of any race, any culture, any color that's dealing with the situations and circumstances that I was dealing with. Like somebody, man, I went my whole life. You had a lot of people around me, older than me, that made it up out of those situations, and you've never seen them again. And you hear about all these folks that made it from Watts to OJ's, Barry White, FloJo, Tyrese, all these people. Guess what? Never see these dudes. They don't come give you no game. They don't lace your boots up. They don't prepare you for the battle of transformation. They don't do none of that. And I always said that would never be me, and I stand on that. That would never be me. And so,
you know, they call LeBron James the kid from Akron. What's the next reinvention for the kid from Watts?
I'm really passionate about helping people.
Yes.
And that's my passion. Yes. Is helping people and changing people's mind and helping them rise above their uncomfortable circumstances. And right now, the restaurant allows that. The chefness allows that. It gives me the platform. If another platform presents itself, if a bigger platform in this industry presents itself where I'm in a position to now lend entrepreneurship and ownership and these things, I'm just, I'm on that path. Right now, I'm in the day-to-day. If I get in a position where I can assist in entrepreneurship and helping people open their own business and generational wealth, I'm for that too. Yeah. If I get invited to go sit in some of these groups in the prison system that I was sitting in 360 programs and our gang rehabilitation and all these programs that they have, I'm in there too.
I love that.
You know what I mean? Like I just was granted my certificate of rehabilitation and recommendation for pardon. And so, if you're listening out there, I can't go back into the prisons now. Just sign me up.
For all my viewers and listeners, if you haven't picked up a copy of California Soul, please do it. Keith, where can my viewers and listeners purchase a copy?
Literally everywhere books are sold. Like, okay.
All right. There
I'm
you
surprised.
Go.
Like, I get to say things like that and it blows my mind. Like, I'm not saying you got to get it out the trunk of my car or you have to pull up to the restaurant. Right. Like literally everywhere books are sold,
There
you
you
can
go.
get California sold. Like
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, brick and mortar. Go
everywhere.
grab a copy of this. It is jaw dropping. It is an unbelievable, it's what it is. It's what it says, an American epic of cooking and survival. And it's just incredible. I can't let you leave just yet before I ask you. I want to go to your restaurant, Alta Adams in LA. I'm actually going to be traveling out there soon. What do I get? Like, what is your favorite? If people out there in the LA area, if they want to go to your restaurant, what's like the number one dish you can recommend that people should order?
So for me, the best dish is always the next dish, right? Because I'm constantly creating. We have a whole new, not an entire new, but a bunch of new offerings that's coming out in February
Okay.
that we dropping. I'm doing a tasting menu of the new items February 6th, and then I'll roll them out into the restaurant shortly after that. But the staples that people really enjoy are the oxtails. They've made number 7, and all of the dishes in LA. LA has a lot of restaurants and a lot of dishes.
Yeah.
And so for oxtails to get number 7 says a lot. Fried chicken, LA Times award-winning fried chicken is really delicious. Everything's really good. But for me, the next dish is always the best dish.
Oh, I love that. What a great answer.
So come in and ask, what's the special?
What's the special?
What's the special?
What's the Keith Corbin special? I love it. Well, Keith, this interview was very anticipated by my fans and followers. And gosh, as we discussed, even people who are locked up in a federal penitentiary, not just because of your humility and grace and your success, but because of your unique story of reinvention. You have proven it is never too late. It is never too late to follow your dreams. It is never too late to put into motion that hope that got you through some of the most impossible of circumstances. And this interview, Keith, will touch more lives than you know, my friend. So thank you.
Yeah. And I just want to say for a lot of us, it's not even reinventing ourselves because we never had an identity. So we're on a journey of inventing ourselves, finding ourselves. Like we're
Yeah. No, I
you know
love
what I mean?
that.
Like we're literally
life is a constant reinvention. Listen, I just talked to somebody the other day who's in her 70s who just scored her first book deal in her 70s. You know, you look at people who take completely different career trajectories after being on one path. They then decide to be a scuba diver instructor. I mean, life is a journey. And life is all about choices. And you're right. It's reinvented, but there's never an end to it. You're always evolving and you're always learning.
Yep.
Thank you, Keith. To all my viewers and listeners, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to Reinvented with Jen Eckhart. That's available wherever you get your podcasts. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, iHeartRadio, you name it, it's there. I'm Jen Eckhart. That was Chef Keith Corbin. Thank you for listening.